Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is Jon Busdeker, your host here at Behind the Star, the official storyteller here at the Sheriff's Office. Yes, that is my actual title. Most of the time I'm shooting video, but we also do this podcast, which gives people kind of a sneak peek at what we do here at the Sheriff's Office. We talk to a lot of deputies, a lot of sworn officers, but we also get to talk to some civilians sometimes, which is good because I'm a civilian. I'm not a sworn officer, so these are my people when I talk to civilians here at the agency. And before we get into it today, and I'm really excited about this interview, before we get into it, I want to say go to our website, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. We put out all kinds of great content. There's a recent video up there that I put together about our teen driving challenge. We have sort of this school for teenage drivers, new drivers, to learn kind of better habits on the road. We're kind of restarting these. Obviously, COVID has sort of changed a lot of things, not just in Florida, but all across the country and the world. But we're restarting these teen driver challenges, and space is super limited. So if you're interested, go take a look at that. That way we can all be safe drivers on the road, because I've driven here in Florida and not everybody is a safe driver here. So with that, I want to introduce Koreen Baker. She is a victim advocate here at the Sheriff's Office. Koreen, welcome to Behind the Star.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I see you in the hallway a lot, and I had no idea exactly what you did and what you do, so I'm glad we could finally talk and explain exactly what a victim advocate is. So maybe start off with that. What exactly is a victim advocate?
Well, a victim advocate is someone who is trained to support victims of crime. They offer emotional support, victims' right information, help in finding needed resources, assistance in filing victims' compensation claims for financial assistance, and also providing any needed resources that they may need as far as counseling, funeral homes, anything that can help them in the days ahead following a traumatic incident.
And so we're going to get into all those different things in a little more detail. But before I get too far, I usually like to ask people, how did you end up here at the Sheriff's Office?
Wow. 16 years ago, I was actually working at the jail in a program, and I saw the advertisement for a social worker. And I decided, because that is my profession, I'm a master's level social worker, I decided I'm going to apply for that. And so I applied for the job, and it was a grant-funded position, and they said it was only for 6 months, and 6 months turned into 16 years.
That's usually what happens, I feel like, around here at the Sheriff's Office. People say, well, I'm just going to work there for a year or so, and it turns into a lifetime career.
Yes.
So you started 16 years ago, and when you started, is it the same job that you're doing now? Has it always been victim advocate, or is it something different?
No, it was completely different. It was a very new program. It was an actual social worker position where social workers and deputies were paired to work in elementary schools, and we were working with the lowest 20th percentile of kids with behavioral problems, academic problems, and our goal was to work with them and help to improve those behaviors, attendance, and work with the family. And so it was a very new experience. It was innovative. No one had ever done that before, so it was great coming to the agency to be a part of a program like that.
So after 6 months was up, they said, we like you here, we want you to stay?
Well, the 6 months actually turned into 4 years with the grant.
Okay.
They extended it, and then after 4 years, the grant ended. And so I moved into other things in community relations. So I've had different roles at the agency. I worked in community relations for most of my career before coming over to the criminal investigative divisions and being a victim advocate.
Okay, and are you from Central Florida originally?
No.
Where are you from originally?
St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands.
Oh, okay. All right.
So you might detect a little accent accent
A
there.
little, not much though, but a little bit. So I just real quick, how did you end up here in Central Florida?
I moved here at the age of 12 with my mother, and I went to school here, went to college here. Started out in middle school, so went to Robbinswood and West Orange High School and UCF. So I'm a Knight.
All right.
And just stayed and enjoyed the opportunities here of starting my career in the field of professional social work.
So victim advocate, explain to me, who are these victims and who exactly are you helping?
Well, as victim advocates for law enforcement, because there's various victim advocates. You can have advocates at the domestic violence shelters, sexual assault centers, but for law enforcement specifically, we're the victim advocates that actually respond out to the crime scenes. And we're responding now to incidents such as homicides, suicides. There are some natural deaths that we will respond to, baby deaths, drownings, overdose. We also go out to anything that involves a serious trauma or crisis.
Okay. All right. And the victims, I mean, some of these, it's going to be the family members or loved ones or spouses.
Correct.
And then other ones, it's going to be probably the actual victim, correct?
Right. Oftentimes, of course, like with a homicide, we're going to be working more so with the family. Mm-hmm. And some of your other serious injury crimes, if the victim themselves may be in an induced coma state, then we're obviously working with the family. So our job is pretty much to assist the victim if they're alive or the family with understanding everything that's happening on that crime scene, helping them to navigate. There's the medical examiner, there's our crime scene investigators, there's our detectives, deputies on scene, crime scene tape. Transport's going to show up. Like, what does all of this mean? I mean, that's not something that they expected in their day.
Yeah, or in their life, I'm
their
sure.
life.
Yeah. I'm sure this is, you're going about your day and having, maybe a great life, and then something terrible happens and you don't probably know how to respond to it. And so that's why the victim advocates exist.
Right.
So let's use that example of a homicide. Let's say that happens here in Orange County. When do you get the phone call? Do you get the phone call, right after it happens, just like the deputies, and you're out there right on scene, or is it maybe a day later or a week later, or when do you get there? And what's like the first thing that you do?
Well, as law enforcement advocates, we're on call 24/7, 365. So there's no break. We're just like the deputies, so we're always available. And so what happens is when there is a homicide, the deputy on scene is usually the first person who's going to assess the scene and determine if we're needed. And then they will call the communication center, who will then contact the on-call victim advocate, and we will then respond out to the scene.
Okay, and so then when you get there, I mean, are you directed towards the family, or I mean, does the deputy say, okay, there's the mom, or there's the dad, or there's the wife, there's the husband, and they introduce you, or you go up to them?
Well, once we arrive on scene, we always identify the deputy who contacted us, and we're trying to gather some information from them. We want to know who the victim is, date of birth, who the next of kin is, and we would have the deputy to then take us over and introduce us, and from there we'll take it from there.
Okay, and when you say take it from there, I mean, what are the next steps?
So after that, we are there to help explain who we are and explain the process of what's going to happen on the crime scene. We're there to provide emotional support. So we're the ones with the tissues, and we're the ones giving the hugs and helping them to console them during that time. We are just pretty much being the liaison between the agency and the family. And we're there to just be a support to them along the way. We are going to be the ones to, if the body is viewable, we assist them. And we go with them to view the body before the body is transported to the medical examiner's office. We are there with them, like I said, throughout the entire process. And even with the legal process that will come days later, or sometimes years later, we are still with the family. We're following up with them. We're connecting them with counseling services, support groups, and we also assist them with anything that they may need following that. Because for instance, I had one family who lost their loved one, and it was Thanksgiving. They had no food.
Oh, wow.
And so as advocates, we received some baskets, and I connected with them because I knew that there were children in the home, and she was now a single mom and would need probably some additional resources. So we would even go as far as connecting them with food baskets for the holidays. And so that is our role. And we're even there with them during the trial, if there is one.
And I feel like these are things that probably the average person doesn't even think about, that, yes, there's a crime that was committed, and I'm hopefully, and our agency is working on the case and trying to either solve the murder, or maybe they know who it is. But then there's this whole sort of background where, you're right, there's all these survivors and family members that need help, that of things that they probably never thought they would ever need. I mean, it's one thing to go bury your grandmother, your grandfather, who, hopefully lived a long life, and you sort of planned out everything. But it's another thing to wake up one day and your loved one's gone, and you look around and you say, well, how do I deal with this? And it's not just probably going to the funeral home. It's, like you said, the medical examiner and maybe a court case and just all the other things, even the support groups. And so you must have just tons of contacts throughout the community to do all this.
We do. And one of the things is we are, as advocates, we make sure that we are connecting ourselves with community resources so that we have that relationship in the event that we need to reach out to someone for food or baby supplies. I mean, things that you just don't think about on a day-to-day. This is a crisis for a family.
Yeah.
And this is something that as advocates we do, and we're trained to do that. And I think having an advocate even goes beyond that, because as you're waiting, now that the crime has been committed and you're waiting for possible trial to occur, families can sometimes feel, or the victims may feel, well, I can't reach the detective. I don't want to ever have a family feel as though they're being neglected. And one of the important roles as an advocate is to make sure that they're able to connect with that detective, get updates. And we do that for them because we understand detectives are busy, but having an advocate and us being right here with them, we can liaison. I can walk over and say, hey, I have this family that's been trying to reach you. Can you provide me an update that I can give them?
Yeah.
And that keeps the family connected so that they don't feel hopeless.
And I'm sure some of those updates are, maybe there's just no update, but I'm sure it's good to hear, like, okay, at least they're working on it and they know that this is important to that person. But just knowing that they are working on it, even if there's no update, is probably a good thing.
Just to know that someone is still working on your case and they have not been forgotten.
Yeah,
is so important to them.
How many? I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. How many victim advocates are there in your? Is it unit or section? I always mess this up.
Well, our squad.
Squad. All right. It's always a different word. If you've listened to enough of these podcasts, you'll know that sometimes there's teams, or sometimes there's sections, sometimes there's units. And so this is a squad. I like it.
Currently, we have 3 advocates.
Oh, okay.
And we are adding 2 more.
I was going to say, we're a huge county. We have, 1.2 million people, and, crime happens here. And I'm sure with 3 and more coming, there's still a lot of work for all 3 of you to do. And even when there's 5 in the office, I'm sure it's just a lot of work.
It is, because we are responsible for every law enforcement agency in Orange County, with the exception of Florida Highway Patrol and University of Central Florida. So when there is a crime scene and they call us, we're the ones that are responding because we are the law enforcement victim advocates here in Orange County.
Oh, so you do Orlando's and Winter Parks and, oh, wow.
Oakland, Winter Garden, every law enforcement agency in Orange County.
So they don't all have their own. They all sort of use the sheriff's office as their victim advocate.
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting, because a lot of things that we do here at the sheriff's office, we cover the unincorporated parts of Orange County a lot of times. There's exceptions to that. But and usually the police departments have their own resources in their own communities. But you're saying for this, we go all over.
Yes.
All right. Wow. You must really be busy then.
Yes.
So over the years, have you really developed relationships with people that, maybe something happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I know you've only been here 16 years, but I'm sure over the years you create some bonds with some of these people.
I have. I've been doing this position now 2.5 years. Within that time, I have developed bonds. I keep in contact with my families and victims and just follow up with them. Even for cases that were in 2018, I may just check in maybe once a month or every other month. But you do develop a relationship, and they're happy to hear from you just so that they can know that you didn't forget about them. And on the anniversary, I may reach out to them and say, how are you handling things today? How are you coping? Just to see how they are and just check in with them, because that anniversary date can be difficult.
What is the biggest need that most of these families and victims have? I mean, where do you help them with the most?
Being of support. Sometimes people just want someone to talk to and someone just to listen to them. And we do that in the days ahead. And so counseling is one of the biggest referrals that we would make, and our support groups. And we have our bereaved survivors of homicide support group. The sheriff's office has an advocate that attends that group. That group is great. It's a 501c3, and they work with survivors, family members who've experienced the loss of a loved one to homicide. And they are instrumental in helping the families to understand the whole process. And they're there with others who've been in that same situation like them, so they don't feel like they're the only ones who've experienced that type of traumatic loss.
So you mentioned counseling. Is that something that a victim can get through the sheriff's office? Or because not everybody has the best health insurance to go get counseling, but I'm sure this is, as we all know, a traumatic experience, and I'm sure we would love everybody to get mental health counseling if they can, but I'm sure everybody can't get it. And so do we recommend them go somewhere, or do they have access to this?
Yes, we provide them with a resource booklet that has all of that information in there. And we also have a listing of free support groups, and some of the support groups also have licensed therapists in those that provide individual counseling as well, and that is free. Oftentimes, those support groups have grant funding, so that's why they're able to provide that service for free. And so we would outline that when we give them the booklet and say, well, these resources are free, and with the counseling services, if they have victims' compensation, that will pay for counseling through the individual therapists that are listed in the booklet. And if it's another incident that we went to where it will not fall under victims' compensation, they can pay for it, but if they cannot, utilize the support groups where it is free.
Yeah. So let's say you show up at a scene, and whether it's a homicide or something else that's traumatic, and you go talk to a family member or a spouse or a loved one. Is there ever instances where they don't want to talk to you? They just say, we don't want this, like you're not here. Or also, do they say no, but then maybe they come back later and say, I know I was in a bad state, but now I do need the help?
Absolutely. Run into that from time to time, and we respect that. And you have to always remember as an advocate that someone has just experienced one of the most traumatic things in their life that was unexpected. And at the time, they may not want to talk to you. But it does not mean that in the days ahead, once they have had time to process everything that has happened, that they wouldn't want to come back and then say, you know what, let's revisit that. And we're okay with that. We're here. We're 24/7, so whatever you need, you can reach out to us.
I mean, what do you say to somebody who may have just lost a loved one to a homicide or a suicide?
You're pretty much telling them, I'm so sorry that you had to experience such a traumatic incident like this. And you're just being there to support them. You let them talk. You listen. You provide them the tissues. You're just there to help console them. You, at that point, have to be able to empathize and put yourself in their shoes and understand what would I like to have at that moment in a time like this. We're not there to provide them with anything at that time. If we're just being a support to them. Whatever we can get for them, if they need water, or if they need us to take them somewhere to the restroom, or do you need food, or whatever we can do to help them at that time, that's what we're there for when we're on that crime scene.
So how do people in this office train for this?
Well, in order to be a victim advocate with this agency, you must have at least a bachelor's degree in social work, sociology, psychology, criminal justice, or related field. And definitely trauma experience is a plus, because that's what we deal with most of the time. So that is the background of most people here. We have bachelor's level here and master's level victim advocates here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. Is this, I'm sure you've done this a while, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Across the country, is it normal to have victim advocates at law enforcement agencies, or is it kind of a rare thing?
No, throughout the country, actually, there's victim advocates in many law enforcement agencies. Every year we have an annual conference that we attend, and advocates from all over the country attend. There's thousands of us that go to this conference. So we're everywhere. Even in the military, they have victim advocates. And like I said, we are in various settings, but definitely law enforcement, especially in the state of Florida, where advocates are everywhere.
So maybe I should have asked this question at the beginning, but so why do victim advocates even exist? Because I think a lot of people, when they think of law enforcement, they think the job is to, catch criminals, investigate crimes, all of that. And this is sort of a different part of it. So why does this even exist here at the sheriff's office?
Well, law enforcement victim advocates are so vital to this profession because the detectives and patrol, they're busy with the investigation, that they don't have time to really assist the victim or the family because their role is trying to solve this crime. And which leaves the victim or the family member left alone trying to navigate by themselves after a trauma, and they don't know what to do next.
Okay.
So it kind of leaves them in a position, if we were not there, they would leave them in a position to try to figure out, where do I go from here? And deputies and detectives are not trained as we are to be able to provide that support and resources. And so they will call on us and say, hey, I have a family out here. We need you on scene. And they know that when we show up, we can be that link to that family with community resources and services that they are not trained to do.
Yeah.
And so we are great help to each other on that crime scene, and we're able to help calm a family down. If they may be crying, and we're there to help console them, so that when it's time for the family or the victim to do their interviews with a detective, they're a little bit more consoled, and they can talk to them so they can get the information that they need. Sometimes victims or families may not feel comfortable talking to the detectives, so they will tell us. And so we build a rapport with the family or the victim on scene that oftentimes may be overlooked because the detectives and patrol are doing their job of investigation and keeping the crime scene contained.
You mentioned the questioning part. Do you ever sit in on those or not?
I don't tend to sit in on the interviews with the detectives.
Okay, I wasn't sure if maybe the victim's family said, I really want my victim advocate here. I've gotten along with him or her, but okay, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Sometimes I've had one or two, but for the most part, I allow them to be with detectives alone, unless they're requesting me, and then I will then ask the detective if this is okay. If they say no, it's not okay.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about victims' families of homicides, but let's switch over to maybe somebody who is the actual victim of a crime, who is still alive, maybe some sort of, I don't know, and you can explain what sort of crimes those are, but maybe some aggravated assault or something that is very serious, but the person's still alive. How is your job different then? Because you're not consoling, you might be consoling the family as well, but now you're actually dealing with the actual victim. So how is your job different when that happens?
Right. It changes a little bit. Because, like I said, you're not dealing with the actual family, but you're dealing with the person that had the trauma happen to them. And so we get calls sometimes from other agencies for sexual batteries or assaults. And we would sometimes go to the hospital. And I've been to the hospital with one victim, and I'm just there with her. And I'm just there letting her know that I'm here if you need to talk. You don't have to, but if you would like to, I'm here. And I'm there with her so that she's not alone. And that is the role, of the advocate at that time in a situation like that, is just to have your presence so that they're not alone. Because sometimes everyone doesn't have family to lean on or friends. And after something that traumatic happens, you don't want to be alone in a time like that. You want someone to be there, just someone who you feel you can trust, and who would just listen if you want to talk.
You mentioned sexual assault, and I'm curious. You said sometimes you're there, you're talking to the person. I assume typically it's a woman. Are there ever cases where a lot of times you hear about this where the woman doesn't want to press charges against somebody, or they're afraid to, and I totally get that. Are there times when you do talk to them and you say, look, like, I'm sure you don't want to convince them to do something they don't want to do, but you might explain, okay, like this is why it might be a good idea to talk to our deputies, or is that not your job?
Yeah, our job is not to coach anyone into making any decision. They have the right to decide what they want, and our job is to support them in that.
Okay.
Because at this time, they may not want to do anything, and they may change their mind later on. And our job is just to be supportive. You know, if they already experienced something traumatic, they don't need another person to make them feel worse than they already feel.
So I'm sure over the years you've dealt with some pretty horrific things, horrific crimes, talked to some people that have had horrific things done to them. How do you deal with all this?
You know, over the years, because I've been a social worker now for 18 years, so I've had to learn how to take care of me. Self-care is so important. And so what I do is I have learned not to take any of this home with me.
Yeah.
I literally leave it at the crime scene, and I take care of myself by prayer, meditation. I do myself, massages. I just make sure that I take time out for myself to do things that I enjoy, that take my mind away from everything that I've experienced. I reduced the amount of time that I watch the news because I practically am living the news every call out. So I reduced the amount of time. I just want to know what the weather is like. And so that's...
You got a phone for that too.
Yeah,
you don't even need the news most
pretty
of the
much
time.
it.
Is there something that you specialize in? I mean, if there's a call that comes in, do they kind of go to whoever, or is there like, okay, this was a homicide and Koreen is good at helping victims of homicide, we're going to send her out there?
No, we have our on-call days. So every advocate has a day, and then we rotate the weekends. So whatever comes in on that day, that's yours.
Oh, okay. All right. Over the years, has it ever been, and maybe you don't do these cases, are there ever cases where you get there and you know the people?
I have not.
Okay. I mean, Orange County is a big place.
Yes. I have not. So I'm glad about that. I'm very happy about that. I have not.
Okay. All right. Are there any cases over the years that have really sort of stuck out for you? Things that you've worked on or you met and you sort of really put them through the whole process, and maybe it took a year, maybe it took 2 years, and at the end of it, or whatever you can say is the end of it, you look back and you say, I really feel good about that one. I mean, without me, maybe this wouldn't have turned out how it did.
Yeah. For me, I haven't had any case yet that has even made it to trial.
Really? Because you've been doing this two and a half years?
2.5 years.
Okay. And that's a long time. And
yes.
So that sort of shows people listening just how long these things can take.
Yes. They're still waiting, pending trial. And so during that time, I'm just checking in on my families and making sure that they're okay. Seeing how they're doing. And, they almost take you on like family. I had one family that sent me a beautiful edible arrangements after I helped her to file for victims' compensation, and she got her money back and everything. And one day this beautiful edible arrangement showed up here, and, they are very appreciative, of you. I've had cards and different things from families. So it's just checking in with them and treating people the way you would want to be treated if something like that was to ever happen to you and your family.
And we said this earlier that, you probably see some pretty terrible stuff. You hear some terrible stuff. What keeps you wanting to do this every day?
I went into this because as a victim advocate, it is rewarding. It can be challenging at times, but it's rewarding because you know that you're helping to make a difference in someone's life during one of their most horrible times. And being able to assist them with helping to navigate what to do next. What's tomorrow going to look like for me? What the months and the years ahead are going to look like for me? Who's going to be there? And just being able to say, I will be there for you. I will walk with you throughout this journey. You're not going to be by yourself. That helps me to continue to do this job because it allows me to see another side, and for other people also to see another side of law enforcement that they don't normally get to see, unfortunately, unless something like tragic happens. But just knowing that this agency cares and they have people here who are able to support you and get you through the days ahead, it's a great job.
Well, Koreen, thank you so much for being a victim advocate, but also thank you for coming on Behind the Star and chatting about what you do. Really, really appreciate it. And I know it's a tough job, so we appreciate you here.
Thank you so much.
And next time I see you in the hallway, I'll know exactly what you do. For everybody else, thanks again for listening to Behind the Star, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Jon Busdeker, and this is Behind the Star.